Good evening. We start with the leader of the Democratic Alliance, John Steenhuisen, saying that what he calls the historic opposition party's national convention is not only about unseating the ANC, but rebuilding what he claims is a broken country.
7 political parties have convened in Kempton Park to discuss the foundation of a multi-party pact aimed at ousting the ANC government in the 2024 general elections. Steenhuisen has urged the involved parties to put their differences aside.
For that to be the case, this cannot and must not be a purely anti-ANC project. It has to be a pro-South Africa project. And tomorrow, when this part of the process is complete, please judge the politicians sitting at this table today on whether their outcomes promise greater hope and tangible improvements for your life and for your future. Ask whether they are collectively providing solutions to things like crime, unemployment, load shedding. If the answer is yes, if these parties emerge with an agreement to not only defeat the ANC, but to rescue South Africa, then I ask that you judge it as a success. Because our country does not have a second to waste. The next election in South Africa will be a hinge of history moment for our country. So now it is time for leaders gathered here today to put aside differences of the past, to forget about the scars of battles gone, and focus firmly on the future.
The parties have also agreed on a name for the pact and its multi-party charter for South Africa.
And it's not going to the moon. It's going somewhere else. Multi-party charter for South Africa. And obviously, as you know, it was quite a big, and it was a collective decision at the end. It was a very robust discussion, but that is what they came up with. So let me repeat it again. Multi-party charter for South Africa. And the second big progress point was a collective vision that the parties agreed on. Discussions obviously now ongoing. It's still ongoing. It is very robust, which is the nature of negotiations. Very, very robust, very frank, very open, but we're making progress.
The IFP leader, Velekosini Khlabisa, says the gathering hasn't centered on hatred for the ANC, but on rather what the party has done to South Africa.
South Africa is on the verge of becoming a failed state. The IFP is here today in this national convention because we believe that there is still hope for our country and for the people of South Africa. However, if we want things in our country to change, we cannot continue to walk the same path that we have been walking. If we want to change, we will have to do things differently. This convention is about South Africa and its people. This is not an anti-ruling party club. Our reason for convening here is much more important. We do not hate ANC, but we hate what the ANC have done in South Africa.
Well, for more on that story, our reporter, Juniour Khumalo, joins us live from Kempton Park. Juniour, when we look at what these political parties have been saying today, they certainly seem to have a lot more impetus than they did this time last week, given all that had unfolded at the national framework. This is the dialogue held by the Deputy President over a framework for coalition governments.
Indeed, Kathy. So this particular dialogue was formed by the 7 parties that are here trying to charter a way of trying to unseat the ANC in next year's elections. They were all at pains to try and say that this coalition is not a formation against the ANC, but a formation for the South African citizens, given what the ANC has put the South African citizens through. So we heard that from the DA leader, we heard that from the IFP leader, Velekosini Khlabisa, But what is interesting is that when the DA leader first announced this moonshot pact back in April at the DA's National Elective Conference, he mentioned that this was going to be formed to keep the EFF out of governance and to unseat the ANC from getting 50% of the votes. So it seems like a change in tone from the DA leader in particular, because he and all the other leaders were emphatic in that this is not meant as a formation against the ANC. But what was interesting as well in terms of what came out of today was also the agreement on a shared vision that the parties will take leading up to next year's elections in how they are going to govern if they do get into governance next year. We're not given any details in terms of what the vision itself entails, but what Professor William Gumede, the chairperson of this coalition, this national convention said was that this vision allows them then to take something tangible to other parties that are not part of this formation that would also be interested in taking part in this grouping that aims to unseat the ANC. So this can be taken to them and they can then pitch a collective on what they want to do heading into next year's election. We also heard that the professor will be coming to address the media in a few hours. The aim is, I think, around 7 o'clock, so in the next 2 hours he might be coming back to give more feedback on what has been achieved since lunch, because the last briefing that we got was at 1 o'clock. So in the 3 hours that they had gathered, they had managed to come up with a new name, then they managed to come up with a new vision, Kathy.
Let's talk about one of the sticking points, Junior, that has come up over the last 2 weeks, and that's really this perception that the DA was cozying up to the ANC and that in all likelihood would be perhaps geared for a coalition agreement with the ANC. It's something that the DA has denied, but they certainly seem to have a lot of common ground in terms of how they see discussions around coalition governments being formed. This particular convention and some of its parties wanted the DA to sign an agreement that under no circumstances would it enter into a coalition agreement with the ANC. What has become of that?
So the DA leader, when he made his address earlier this morning, he did indicate that the DA was fully behind this national convention. He said that there were no plans for the party to go into coalition with the ANC. And what we understand is that there will be a resolution that is signed at the end of this convention, which is tomorrow, where all these parties will pledge to not work with the ANC. But there seems to be disagreements in terms of the clause. So some parties are saying that they should sign a clause that says no party will go into coalition with the ANC if this particular grouping of parties manages to get a 50% plus one, meaning if it manages to get a majority when it comes to next year's election. So some of the parties, including the DA, we understand, are saying that the clause should say only that. It's not supposed to say that all the parties should commit to not working with the ANC, even if this coalition does not get a majority. If it doesn't get a majority, all the parties want to be free to negotiate with whoever they want to get into coalition with, Kathy.
All right, Junior, Khumalo is covering that convention for us, Stephen. One certainly gets the sense that a lot of even what is agreed now between these parties is going to change significantly between this time frame and, of course, next year's election.